Hello, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started with our iMeet Central University course today. Today we're going to be talking about databases. This is a one-on-one course for any of you who are thinking about using a database, or maybe you're using one already and you're wondering what some of those fancy advanced features do. This course is for you. The expected outcomes for today's call are to understand how to create databases and then submit and view records in iMeet Central. Understand how to utilize advanced database features, including database subscriptions, custom views, workflow, and more. And finally, learning how to import and export data. In today's course, we're going to spend a lot of time actually in the product playing around, so there aren't going to be a whole lot of slides, which is nice. So why don't we go ahead and get started with just some database basics. So understanding how to create a database, understand how to submit and view records, and how to edit records once they've been submitted. So I'm going to go ahead and, without further ado, dive into the system. So here I am logged into iMeet Central. I'm logged in as a fictitious user named Andrea Caravis. You can see her picture up here in the top right corner. And I'm in a sandbox account called Vacao, and this is where we're going to build a database and play around with the tool. Why use a database? It's a big question. A lot of people ask, why use a database? And typically what I recommend is that if you use a spreadsheet for anything, if you have an Excel spreadsheet that lives on your computer and you've thought to yourself, man, I'd love to make this thing public to my team, or I'd like to be able to store more content than just what's in these cells, databases are a great spreadsheet replacement. They are used for a number of things. You can use a database to track inventory. You can use a database to receive inbound marketing requests. For this example, we're going to go ahead and create a database that is a travel request. As if a member of my team needs to request travel to visit our customers, and I need to be able to track where they're going, when they're going, what the purpose of the travel is, and I also need them to later go in and update what their expenses were so that I'm able to down the road run a report and say, like, how much did we spend on hotels when visiting a specific client? We can get a lot of that out of a database. So to get started, what I'm going to do is in this account, I'm going to go ahead and create a workspace. So I'm just going to start completely from scratch. I'm going to use the default project workspace template, and let's go ahead and I'm going to call this the travel request. Let's just call it travel requests. That works. And let me put it in a corresponding workspace group. We'll do this for our marketing department. And I'm going to add some users just for fun. I'll add myself and David and Eddie and Helen and John. And I don't need Kevin in there. Nat, Tate. Okay, great. So there are some people we're going to add, and I'm going to click on Create Workspace. Workspaces can house as many databases as you'd like to create. It's very important to know that what happens in one database can in no way, shape, or form affect what happens in another database. They are completely siloed from one another. So if you've ever thought, I'd like to create multiple databases for one thing, you may run into some long-term sustainability issues. You're going to find that you're not able to combine views, and so whenever and wherever possible, try and put things in a single database. In this case, I'm going to go to the settings area here and go to tab options, and I'm going to turn on the database tab. So as a workspace admin, I can turn on the database tab right here, and I'll click on update, and now I have my database tab. And I'm going to click on the database tab, and it's going to say, hey, you don't have any databases yet. And you can watch, we've got a little help video here, which is nice. But I'm going to click on New Database. There are multiple ways to create a database. You can create a database by importing from an existing table. We'll talk about that later. You can use a template, which, to be honest, I've never done, and I don't know anybody who has. They're there if you want to play with them, but I typically don't recommend using them. I like this, create from scratch. I just say, give me all the keys, and I like to start by creating from scratch. So I'm going to create a new database, and the name of this database is going to just be called Travel Request Database. Pretty straightforward, Travel Requests Database. And I'll give it a description. This database will house all of our travel requests and allow agents to update their expenses. Perfect. Okay. There are some additional options for your database. For example, do you want to add a tab for this database to your tabs across the top? Why not? I'll say yes. If you use external user licenses, do you want to make this internal use only so you can hide this from external users? I'll say no. You can decide whether or not you want to allow duplicates, and allowing duplicates is a two-step process. I always just leave this as no, and it never causes me any problems. Down below it says, well, you need to attach any of the following to a database record. So a record, which in this case is going to be a travel request, we can make comments. We can attach files. So maybe I need people to upload copies of their receipts afterward. Sure, I'll go ahead and I'll turn that on. And I'll associate tasks, and I'm going to turn that on too. And the use case here is going to be after a person's travel date, I want a task to be created to tell the person, hey, you need to submit your expense report and submit those receipts. I'm going to click on Next. And then it asks me, all right, you need to create your data fields. And it's funny, we stuck this in the top right corner. Don't ask me why, but that's where it is. It says create data fields. And this is where I now decide what are the fields I want a person to fill out when they're submitting a travel request. So the first one is name. I need a person to enter in their name. And when I press the Tab key, like that, you'll see it automatically updates this value, API ID. The API ID is used if ever you wanted to create your own API integration. So using our API integration, you can create database records using other programs. It's kind of advanced stuff we're not going to talk about today. Just know that you can make the API ID whatever you want. It doesn't matter. It can match the name of the field. Most of the time I just skip it. And that's what I would recommend you do. Just ignore that for like engineering, high-tech stuff. The field type can be one of many different types. So traditional field types, we've got text fields, numeric fields, currency, and percentage. We've got a date field and a date and time field. There's a yes/no checkbox. There's an email address field, which is fun. I'll show you what that does in a moment. You can store a person's phone number. You can have people insert links. You can have drop-down lists where people can select something from a drop-down list, or you can have them select multiple things using little checkboxes. This pulls from your proof group list if you're using proof. This Wysiwyg rich text editor is essentially, it's like a mini Word document. Like you can make things bold and italics and underline. I tend not to use it a whole lot just because it complicates things for me. So I just like using the text multiple line field when I can. You can have people attach images and embed those images in the actual record. You can create database relationships, which we'll look at here in a moment. I can include an internal member picker or a workspace member picker. So if you wanted to say, pick from someone in this workspace, you could use that field type. There's an elapsed time field, which is it's an older field. We tend not to use it very much. If you want to play with it, you can. There's a numeric formula field, which allows you to create formulas based on fields within that record. You cannot create formulas that add things across multiple records. So you would need to export to an Excel file, and I'll show you how to do that later if you ever want to do like crazy calculations and stuff. Concatenated text allows you to merge two field values together into one. That doesn't mean you're adding them. It means if you've got a field that says color and another field that says vegetable, and in the color field someone types in red, and in the vegetable field they type in carrot. Y'all thought I was going to say tomato, but tomato's a fruit. You can create a concatenated field that says red carrot because of those two fields. The most common use of a concatenated field is to create like job ID numbers. So if you ever said, every time I create a record, I want there to be this job ID that says, you know, ABC and then the date, and then the title of the project. You can use a concatenated text field to do that. And then there's NetSuite record, which you use our NetSuite integration that comes into play. So I'm going to go ahead and for their name, I'm just going to say plain text. That's fine. Then I'm going to go ahead and say I need their email address. And I'm going to say email address. And you know what? These fields, these records are going to be created by internal users. So actually what I'm going to do for name, I'm going to use the internal member field type. And then where it says default value, I'm going to update that to say logged in user, which means whoever it is that's filling out this request, their name is going to auto-populate, which is pretty cool. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say, let's say date of travel. We're just going to assume that they're only traveling for 1 day. And then I'm going to go ahead and say destination. So I'm going to ask them to enter in a city. For the next one, I'm going to go ahead and say purpose of visit. And I'm going to make this a multiple line text field, so give them a little room to type. For the default value, I'm going to go ahead and put in here, please describe what you're planning on doing during this on-site visit. And then the last field I want them to fill it out is I'm going to go ahead and say business purpose. Why are we going? What is this feeding into? And I'm going to make this a multiple choice drop-down list. And I'm going to go ahead and say account growth, recovery, on-site training, and why not, schmooze. Which would be a terrible business model, but I'm going to make that an option. You're going to go and schmooze. There's an option for you. All right. There's some other little buttons in here. There's this one up here that says primary. And the primary field is essentially what the server refers to this record as. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it as name for right now. But you'll see in a little bit what that primary field does. And then the other little pickers here are required and searchable. So if you require something to be filled out, you can check this box here and say, you got to give me the date, I need your email address, and I need the destination. But the purpose of visit and business purpose, I'm going to go ahead and just leave, is not required. And I'm going to click on Create Database in the bottom right-hand corner, and it takes me to the Add Record form. So let's back up. I created a database, and when I created the database, I checked that little box that said Add Tab for this database. And you can see now that there's a tab at the top of the workspace here that says Travel Request Database. Now that that's done, why not just get rid of this database tab? So I'm going to go ahead and go back into tab options. And I'm going to turn off the database tab. And I'm going to click Update. So now I've got my Travel Request Database tab. And if I click on this, it's going to show me a list of all of my travel requests. Every request is treated as a record. Now, if you're using a database for like a marketing request, then every marketing request is a record. If it's an inventory database, then every inventory line is a record. A record is the basic building block of a database. If you want to think of it in terms of a spreadsheet, a record is a row in your spreadsheet. When the database has no records to display, you're going to see this thing that says no records found, but you can create a new record by clicking the new record button in the top left corner, and you can fill out the little form in those fields that you created. So there's the name field. It automatically populated. My email address, I'm going to go ahead and say Andrea Karavis at email.com. My date of travel, so my date field has got this nice little calendar picker. All right, I'm going to travel on Thursday the 24th. Where am I going? I'm going to Boston. What's the purpose of the visit? And look, there's that default content. So please describe what you're planning on doing during this on-site visit. Going to sit with the client and discuss their 2019 roadmap. 2-hour meeting and offering a 1-hour lunch. Sure. That's nice. We're going to take them out to lunch. Business purpose, multiple choice drop-down picker. This is going to be account growth. We're trying to grow this account. and I'm going to go ahead and click on Save and Done. When the record is created, at the bottom of the record view, you can see I have my comments area. So I can come in here and I can use my comments tool. I can say, hey, David, want to come along with this? Comment. I can upload files, and I can create tasks. So back when I created the database, there were those checkboxes. Do you want to make comments, attach files, create tasks? Those checkboxes enable these tabs. Now let's go back to our travel request database, and you'll see I now have a record. Here it is. So Andrea Karavis is going to travel on the 24th to Boston, going to sit with a client, discuss their 2019 roadmap. It's an account growth. Awesome. After a record is created, you can edit it in two ways. Either you can click to edit fields here in the list layout. So maybe the date of travel is going to get changed, and we're actually going to go the next Thursday, the 31st. So I can change that here using click to edit. I can also click this little pencil icon here, and it lets me go into greater detail, and I can spend more time making changes, and then I can click Save. So maybe I'm going to scrap the lunch. Click on Save. From the list layout, if I go back to the database again, from the list layout, I can also make changes to my database records in bulk by clicking the little checkbox beside the database record. And then I have my Edit button, and I have a Delete button. The Edit button will allow you to make bulk updates across multiple records, but if you click the Edit button, it lets you make changes to the property fields one at a time. So it doesn't let you do like 3 updates at once. You know, you can say, all right, let's go ahead and update the purpose of visit here, or maybe I want to edit the business purpose and say this is a schmooze instead. You can also delete records by clicking the checkbox here and then clicking the delete button here at the top. Now, you remember when I said the primary field is the field by which our database addresses your record? That's kind of a weird way of saying it's how your record it's how the database identifies the record. This record is identified by its primary field, and the primary field is the name field. And so when I look over here on the right, it says latest viewed records, and it says Andrea Karavis. If the primary field were the destination, then it would say Boston, Massachusetts over here. So a common use of the primary field setting is if you are using like a job ID or something like that, you might want to make that your primary field, because then you'll see a bunch of job IDs over here on the right-hand side. Now, after the database has been created, you can make changes to it by going to the Options button in the top right corner, and you come on down to where it says Database Actions, Edit. And from this screen, you can change the name of the database, the description. You can turn those tabs on or off. So maybe you're like, oh, I don't want to attach files. You can uncheck this box and click Save Changes, and that tab will disappear. From the database edit screen, you can also create new fields. So if you want to add more fields, you can edit your existing fields. So maybe you decide, hey, there's another business purpose that I need to track. I can add that down here. I'm going to go ahead and say marketing opportunity. So now that option is available in that picker. Pretty simple. There is the Arrange Fields tab. And the Arrange Fields tab allows you to change the layout of a record when you're looking at it in iMeet Central. So when you open a record and you're looking at it, you'll see these fields arranged as follows: name, then email address, date of travel, destination, purpose of visit, and business purpose. But I can rearrange the layout very easily by just clicking and dragging and moving these things around. So I can say, let me put that up here, and let me make the destination really wide, because why not? And then I can rename the section. You see where it says Untitled? If I hover over it, it says double click to edit field. If I double click, I can go ahead and say travel details, and I'll press enter on my keyboard, and that updates. There are two layouts when you look at a record. There's the layout for viewing and the layout for editing, and those can be different. So if you wanted to have a different edit layout than a view layout, you can do that. And so what would be an example of doing this? Well, let me show you. I'm going to go ahead and click Apply to Edit Layout down here in the corner, and then I'm going to click on Save Changes, and then I'm going to make a minor update. I'm going to go to the Layout for Edit right here. You see this link, it says Layout for Edit. And it looks exactly the same. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and remove the business purpose. And I'm going to click on Save Changes. The edit layout is the layout a person looks at when they are submitting the request. So if I remove the business purpose field from the layout for edit and I go back to the travel request database and click on New Record, business purpose is not here. If I submit my request for travel, I get destination, Las Vegas, very serious business happening in Vegas. I'll click on Save and Done. When the record is created, oh look, the business purpose appears. This is the view layout. So if I go back to my list of records and I see these little icons over here on the left where it says View Record or Edit Record, this is the view layout and this is the edit layout. And I'm going to give you an example here in a moment, a real-life example of why you might remove a field from the Add Record form. So let me go back into Database Actions Edit, and I'm going to update that layout. So I'm going to go to Arrange Fields, and I'm going to go to my layout for viewing and click on Apply to Edit Layout, click on Save Changes, so we're all up to speed. All right. So we now understand, let me see, that was me. That was a picture of the Death Star in the background. That was kind of neat. I'm just looking at my agenda here real quick. So now we understand how to create and update a database. I'm going to take a look here at the chat. I don't see any questions right now, so let's move on now to sort of our next piece of the puzzle. So let's talk about some advanced options. So custom views, view subscriptions, workflow, and web forms. Now things are going to start to get a little bit more practical. So custom views allow you to change the column layout and the list view layout when you're looking at the list of records. We can subscribe people to those views. If a person ever said, hey, I want to get a regular email with a copy of all these records. We can create workflow automation so that when records are created or modified, people can be notified or tasks can be created. And then we can use web forms to allow people to create records even if they're not a user in iMeet Central, which is pretty fancy. So I'm going to go back into the demo environment and let's actually start building this out and fleshing it out with some more context. There are some important pieces of information that are missing from this database, right? I understand that a person submits a travel request and they enter their name, business purpose. We don't have any idea who they're going to visit yet. So here's where a parent-child relationship, a parent-child database can really come in handy. Let's say that in addition to needing to track requests for travel, we also want to be able to say, I need to track clients and relate those two things together. So how many times did we travel to visit a particular client? In order to accomplish that, I'm going to need to create a separate database. I'm going to go back into Tab Options and turn on the Database tab again. Click on Update. I'm going to click on the Database tab, and the Database tab shows me a list of databases. I'm going to click on New Database, and I'm going to create from scratch, and this database is going to be called Client Database. This database is going to keep track of all clients. I'm going to allow comments, files, and tasks, and I'm going to click on Next. And the information I want to track for a client is I'm just going to track a couple things. Client name, key contact, phone number. I'm going to track their address, which is going to just be a multiple choice or a multi-line text field. And I'm also going to track their industry. I'm going to make this a multiple choice, allow multiple selections. And this one's going to say pharmaceutical, tech, creative, and industrial. I'm going to come down to where it says Create Database, and I'm going to click on Create Database, and now I have a second database in this workspace. And this database keeps track of my clients. And I'm going to go ahead and create one record. The client here is going to be Johnson Mining Co. And the key contact is going to be John Doe. And his phone number is 555-555-5555. Address is 1234 Main Street. And we'll say that this is in Boulder, Colorado. And they're in the industrial industry, but they also dabble in some tech stuff, which is cool. And I'm going to click on Save and Done. If I go back to my database tab up here at the top, I now see that I have two databases in this workspace. I'm going to relate them to one another using what's known as a parent-child database relationship. I'm going to go to the Travel Requests database. And I'm going to add a field to this database that allows a person to select the client that they're going to visit. I'm going to go to Options. I'm going to come down here to where it says Database Actions Edit. And I'm going to create a new field. And the field is going to be called Client. The field type is going to be a parent-child database relation right here. It says database relation. It says, what database do you want us to look at? And you're going to select the client database. And then it's going to say, which field do you want them to choose from? And I'm going to have them choose from the name of the client. But I can have them choose by key contact or industry. But I'm going to say client name. And then where it says show records in parent database, I'm going to check that box, and you'll see why in a moment. And I'm going to click Create Field and Done. And then it takes me to my Arrange Fields tab, and I need to add this to the layout. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the layout. I'm going to put this up at the top. Let me move that over here. Why not? Business purpose I'll put down below. Just kind of rearrange a couple things. All right. Click Apply to Edit Layout. Click Save Changes. If I go back to my Travel Request database now, and I create a new record, there is now a multiple choice drop-down picker here in the corner that says Client. This picker refers to my other database. So it allows me to say, I'm going to visit Johnson Mining Company. My email address is Andrea Karavis. I'm going on the 29th. The destination is going to be Boulder, Colorado. Purpose of the visit, review latest tech offerings, and provide a marketing strategy. Why not? This is going to be a marketing opportunity, and I'm going to click on Save and Done. When you use a relational field in a database, that field, the value, becomes a link to the other record. So if I click this link here, it will take me to the Johnson Mining Co. record. And because I checked that box, Show Records in Parent Database, now when I look at the Johnson Mining Co. record, I see a history of every time we've ever been to visit. So this is now looking kind of cool. Again, if I go back to my Database tab and I click on Client Database, there's Johnson Mining Co. And if I click the I to view the record, I see the list of records down below. So I can kind of hop back and forth. Now, if I wanted to, I can actually create a travel request from this page. You'll see that there's a new button here in the top right corner that will allow me to create a new travel request to visit Johnson Mining. So maybe I'm going to go out again next month on the 26th, going to Boulder. Please describe. This is going to be a follow-up on-site to discuss contract. Business purpose, this is account growth. Save and done. So using that relational field, I now have this sort of like master record, Johnson Mining Company. I can track whatever information about this company I want. I can use my comments, files, and discussions and tasks tabs at the bottom. A common use case here would be I'm going to keep track of their contract here on the database. So if you're ever looking for the Johnson Mining Company contract, it's here. And I then have a history of every time we ever went out to visit them. Let's go even deeper. I'm looking at the question, the chat box. I'm not seeing any, so we must be doing okay. Let's go a little bit deeper. Let's say that when a request is submitted for travel, it has to be approved. That's a pretty common use case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my travel request database, and I'm going to add some fields to start tracking this stuff. I'm going to go to Options, Database Actions, Edit, and I'm going to create some new fields. I'm going to create some fields for tracking whether or not a request has been approved. So I'm going to create a field here called Approval Status. And the field type is going to be a multiple choice drop-down picker. And the statuses are going to be new, pending, approved, not approved. I can't set a default value until I've created these four options, so I'm going to go ahead and click Create Field and Done. I'm then going to go back into Edit Existing Fields, and I'm going to set the default value to be new, which means anytime a request is submitted, the value is new. I'm going to create a couple more fields. Edit Existing Fields. I'm going to create a new field right here. I'm going to add a field called Submitted Date. When was this submitted? I'm going to make it a date field and set the default value to today. I'm going to click on Create Field and Done. I'm going to create one more. Approval date. When was this request approved? And that's going to be a date field, and the default value is going to be blank. Create Field and Done. And so now I have some new fields for approval and tracking approval for a request. I'd like to separate these fields from my travel details so that when I look at the record, they're sort of contained in two different areas. To do that, I'm going to add a new section. So here in the top left corner, you'll see it says Add New Section. I'm just going to drag this down here and drop it right at the bottom, and I'm going to put this, I call this section Administration. And in this section, I'm going to pull in the submitted date, the approval status, and the approval date. Remember when I said there are times when maybe you don't want fields to appear on the edit layout? There are fields that you don't want a person to know about or fill in when they're submitting a request. This is a perfect example of one of those times. I'm not going to apply this change to the edit layout. I'm only going to apply this change to the view layout. Now, if you're paying close attention, you may have started scratching your head. You're like, well, wait a minute. The submitted date field, the default value is the date that the record is created. If that field is not on the edit layout, which means it's not visible when a person creates the record, is it going to know what to put in there? The answer is yes. If you have a field with a default value set, and that field lives only in the view layout, it's still going to work. So let's check this out. This is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to go back to my travel request database. I'm going to click on New Record. And again, this is the edit layout. So I'm visiting Johnson Mining, my email address, date of travel. I'm going to go out in July 27th. Destination, Boulder, Colorado. And this is going to be a 30-day contract review on-site, 1 hour with CFL. And this is going to be some on-site training. I'll click Save and Done. And after the request is created, I now land on my view layout and notice my default values. The submitted date captured and the approval status captured as new. So how do we track and monitor new requests, approved requests, and so on? That brings us to, if I go back to my travel request database, that brings us to talking about editing the view layout. So this is called the list view. And you'll notice that I've got my columns across the top as I've been creating records. I got all this data here. I can click to edit on any of these things. I can sort by these, like sort by date of travel, sort by destination, sort by business purpose if I wanted to look at that. I noticed that this one doesn't have a business purpose, so let me go ahead and give it one. I'm going to go ahead and say that this is schmoozing. To make a change to this list layout, I'm going to need to go up here to the Options button in the top right corner, and you'll see here it says View Actions, Edit. When you edit a view, you're changing that list layout. You can add or remove columns. You can change the way things are sorted by default, and you can create filters. To add a column to the list, simply pick the value that you want to appear as the column header from this column here. It says Field. And you got all these little drop-down pickers. So I want to pull in the, where is it, approval status. And then where it says Sort By, I want to start sorting it by, let's sort it by the submitted date, for example. Although I don't think I'm going to have all that, so I'll use a different one. I'm going to use Created On. The difference between Created On and submitted date, Created On is a system field. The system captures when something was created, so I'm going to go ahead and use that as my sort, and I'm going to click on Update, and now my view has my approval status column. A common use case involves requiring a view that only shows new requests, right? You said, well, I just want to see the ones that are new. So we're going to create a new view. You can create as many views as you like. When you create a new view, they appear in this drop-down picker. So right now we're looking at the standard view, which by default is always the first view that you create. When you create a new database, that standard view pulls in every column that you would need for every single field that you build. So the standard view tends to be kind of a global view. I want to create a new view, but I don't want to start from scratch. I want to just clone the existing one. So I'm going to come up here to where it says Options, View Actions, Clone, and I'm going to call this New Requests. To create a filter, you'll see this comparison column. I'm going to change the comparison value for the approval status from None to Is, and then I'm going to select New from the value picker. So now this view will only show me records where the approval status is new. The other thing that I want to do here is I want to change my column arrangement. I want to pull the business purpose up near the front. So I'm going to drag it up to the top. And by dragging and rearranging these, I'm actually going to change the order of my columns. I'm going to click on Update in the bottom right-hand corner. And now I have a filtered view that only shows me new requests, where the approval status is new. Now this is kind of cool because I now have this dynamic view, right? So if I go to the standard view, and let's make a couple of these new. I'm going to use my bulk editor, so I'm going to check these two, click on Edit, change the approval status to new, and click on Apply Changes. Now if I go back to my new requests view, I now have 3. Cool. And maybe one of these gets approved. Change this value right here to approved. Click out of the field, give this a refresh, and now my list is only showing those new ones again. So this is a filtered view You can create as many views as you'd like. Keep in mind that any views you create are going to appear in this drop-down picker and be visible to everybody who has access to this database. So just be mindful if you guys start creating views where, you know, it says like Kevin's view. Not to pick on you, Kevin, but if you had a view called Kevin's view, everybody's going to see Kevin's view. If you're working with a team of people who say, I need my own view because I need to be able to filter by blah, 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 and you decide as an administrator, no, that's crazy. You can meet your end user halfway, and you can create what are known as runtime filters. So what is a runtime filter? A runtime filter, let me go back to my standard view, allows a person to sort of like search or filter by a value without having to switch views. So let me show you what that looks like. If I go back up here to Options, View Actions, Edit, and let's say that someone said, I need to be able to sort by business purpose. Well, if you've got like 5 business purposes, you don't want to create 5 views. Just come into a view and update the business purpose to be a runtime. So you check this little box right here in the runtime column. And when you check that box and you click on Update, something fun happens. It creates a little search engine right here at the top of the view. So if someone says, I need to be able to search by business purpose. Okay, cool. You don't need to create multiple views. Just turn on runtime so that that user, that one-off person, can come in here and say, only show me schmooze. And they can run those filters here. If a user says, I need to be given an email every day of all the new requests, you can create database subscriptions. This is not a very commonly known feature because, unfortunately, it's hidden in the options menu. You may not know this, but in the options menu on a database, if you scroll down just like a teensy bit, boop, there's a subscriptions button right here. Is that crazy? It's like just below the fold, but it's there. Subscriptions, if I click on that, allow you to send automated emails with a transcript of the database to a user in the system or anybody with an email address. They don't even need to be a user in iMeet Central. You can still send them a copy of things. So in this case, we may have like a CFO who says, hey, I need to be notified of any new travel requests because budget and stuff is going crazy here. I can go ahead and here I can say like, you know, CFO Sally at vacao.com, not a user in the system. That's fine. I type their email address there. I go to daily email frequency, and I'm like, all right, when do you want it? I need it every day, and I need it like every 2 hours from, if I did like 8 to 8, it would only send once. So you got to get a little clever here. And you can say email even if no results. All right, cool. So there is now a subscription on this new request view. So really nice way to automate that notification. What if a user says, I need to be notified via email whenever a new request is submitted, and I don't care how many emails I get. If there are 30 requests, I want 30 emails. We can accomplish that using database workflow. Database workflow is what takes a database from being just like a place where people dump data, and it really turns it into some cool, automated, and sort of organic process. To create database workflow, you're going to go to the Options button in the top right corner, and you're going to come down to where it says Workflow. And the first time you create a workflow rule, you can watch a little video, or you can just click on Build a New Workflow Rule to get started. Workflow rules are very simple. They may be a little intimidating at first, but I promise you, once you get the hang of them, they're very, very simple. Workflow rules operate on an if this, then that model. So a workflow rule will trigger when something happens, and it will do one thing. Workflow rules don't do multiple things. So if you ever need to create a complex process with multiple things that happen, you're going to need multiple workflow rules. In this case, let's say like Sally CFO or CFO says, I need an email whenever a new request is submitted. I can create an email workflow rule here. I'm going to go ahead and title it. And I like to title my workflow rules a special way. You can see my auto-populate tool is like, oh, you're creating an email one. Notify Sally CFO when a new request is submitted. So this is going to be an email notification. When a record is added, who do I want to notify? I can notify a user group, or just an email address, so I can send this email to someone who's not in the system. I want to send it to Sally CFO at vacao.com, and it says email participant. I'll click on that. And then down below, I can customize my email template, and I can customize my template message. So I can say something like, new request for travel, and I can merge values from the database into the actual email itself, which is cool. So I can say like name. And so what that'll do is that whatever the name is on that request, it's going to show up in the subject line. Teams like to use this to create email workflow, like Outlook email macros. So if you want certain things to like always end up in a folder, in this case, you know, maybe you create a macro that says anytime it says new request for travel, stick it in this folder. So you know that the subject line always comes in the same. And then we can have a template message, and that template message can include values from the request. Like, let's see, what's a good one? Let's do client. Client visiting. And I can embed that value right here. It says insert into template. If I click on that, it sticks that code there. And don't worry, Sally CFO is not going to get an email with a bunch of hashtags and weird cap words. These values are going to be replaced in the actual email that she receives with those values. And I'll click on Create Workflow Rule. So now anytime a request is submitted, Sally CFO gets an email. Now what if Sally CFO gets more specific and she says, you know, that Eddie guy, he submits a lot of requests. Can I be notified when he submits one? I don't care about all the other ones. I want to spy on Eddie. You can modify an existing workflow rule by clicking the workflow rule name, and you can make changes to it. And in this case, you might say, you know what, there's some additional criteria here that we want to be mindful of. So not just when a record is added, but when a record is added and when, ooh, this gets scary now, the name is Eddie. Save workflow rule, and so now this workflow rule has been trained only to send an email notification when Eddie submits it. What if Sally CFO gets even more specific and she's like, oh man, that Johnson Mining Company, Eddie goes out there a lot. He visits a lot of people, but he visits Johnson Mining Company a lot. I want to be notified anytime he submits a request to visit Johnson Mining Company. I go back into my workflow rule, and I just add additional criteria. So you see where this little plus icon right here? I can add as many additional criteria as I want. So I can say, when the name is Eddie Burrup, and the client is Johnson Mining Company, Sally CFO is going to get an email notification. Workflow rules can be used to also create tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one. So I'm going to create a new workflow rule, and I'm going to go ahead and create a task that says task creation, and get Andrea to sign off on new requests. So if there's a member of the team who needs to be going in and approving these things and I want to create a task for them, I can do that automatically. So I can use a task creation workflow rule when a record is added. I can call it whatever I want. Approve request, and I will insert the name of the request, client, copy, paste. Copy, paste, on, and I'll pull in the date of travel, copy that, put that here. I'll give it a little description. A request for travel was submitted by, I'll pull in the name, name, and then I'll also pull in on requested date, submitted date. Please approve. I'm going to assign this to a specific user. I'll assign it to Andrea, why not? And where it says assign record variables, I'm not going to include anything there. Copy, blah, 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 blah. Start date will be the next day, so I'm going to give Andrea 1 business day to get started on this. But the due date also needs to be within a day. So within 24 hours, I need a decision made on this stuff. I'll give it a high priority, and why not, I'll send a notification via email as well with a subject line, new request received, please approve, and so on. And I'll click on Create Workflow Rule now, and let's actually test this. So let me review it. Anytime a request is submitted, go ahead and, perfect, create a task. So let's try this. I'm going to go to New Record. I'm going to go, I'll change the name. I'll say David is requesting. The client is going to Johnson. Everybody's visiting this one client. The email address is dmanning@email.com. Date of travel, 22nd. The destination, Boulder. What are they doing? Going behind Andrea's back because the contract she wrote wasn't good. Ooh. Now there's like drama going on, and this is a recovery. I'll click on Save and Done. This request gets submitted. The approval status is set to new. The submitted date is May 9th. And if I scroll down, oh look, there's a task that's been created. Approve request, Johnson Mining Company on May 22nd. Andrea can come in here and say, all right, this is approved. And then she can complete her task. And on we go. So we just dug into some more advanced stuff, creating custom filtered views. We talked about subscriptions. We talked about some workflow, some examples of workflow. I'm looking at the question area. I'm not seeing any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and bring us home with our last couple of things, how to import records and how to export data. So the database feature in iMeet Central is not trying to replace Microsoft Excel. And I get a lot of people who are in an implementation or we're configuring something and they say, well, we want to be able to like add values together across records, or we want to be able to like color code this stuff. And those are all very valid requests. But remember that the reason why we're using databases, the reason we're using iMeet Central to house this data is to collaborate, right? To have a back and forth conversation between people about a request to visit someone, to upload files and see them in the context of a request. But when it comes to like crunching data and running statistical analysis, we always recommend that the best thing to do is to export your database and crunch it using a program like a spreadsheet program like Excel. You can export your database at any time by going to the Options button in the top right corner and come down here to where it says Export to CSV. Now this will export your entire database, but if you just want to export the contents in your current view, you can come down here to where it says View Actions, Export to CSV. And once you export a database, you can then use a more powerful, robust program for doing that kind of data analysis. Conversely, let's say you wanted to take an existing Excel spreadsheet and dump it into iMeet Central so you can unlock all this cool functionality. In the Options menu, you also have an Import Data ability as well. And the Import Data wizard it's kind of funky. You're literally going to take your Excel spreadsheet, save it as a CSV, and then you just paste it in here and click on Continue. I don't have an example handy to show you right now, but our import wizard will allow you to map all of your column headers and create database records from an existing spreadsheet. So if you remember way back when we started, if I click on the database tab and I click on new database, you've got this option here to import from an existing table. So you can create a database at inception by importing from a spreadsheet, or you can just add records after the fact. I'm a big proponent, and I highly recommend that if you have an existing spreadsheet and you want to convert it, just start by importing like 3 or 4 rows to make sure you got it right, and then import the rest of them afterward, because I can't tell you the number of times I've imported spreadsheets with like 1,000 rows. It takes time. It can take like 10 or 15 minutes. And then once it's done importing, it's like, oh, I made a mistake, and you got to start all over again. So go easy on yourself, and when you import, start with like 3 or 4 rows on that spreadsheet, and then grow it afterward. So that wraps up our presentation on Databases 101. We talked about a lot of stuff today: creating databases, creating records, updating views, changing fields, arranging layouts, workflow rule, you name it. We ran the gamut. So thanks for hanging in there with me. This does wrap up our iMeet Central University course for today. If you have questions later on and you're like, what was that thing that I did, and you want to learn more, highly recommend that you visit our help center at help.imeetcentral.com. If you're working on a database and something doesn't seem to be working right, go ahead and contact our support team directly at support@imeetcentral.com. Just want to thank you all again. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. And thank you.